Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. Now, I ask everyone on the show, and I'd be interested to hear your answer. If, say, you were at a Aussie barbecue and a complete stranger came up to you and asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
You know, it depends on the kind of barbecue it was and who was there. So, I mean, if it was friendly company, I'd probably say, well, I'm a channeler and an author. Or I might say, I used to be a college teacher and now I do this odd spiritual work. I would probably frame it dependent upon the audience. But I do tell people I'm a psychic and a channeler. That's how I introduce myself.
Yeah, beautiful. And what's the general reaction? Has it changed over the years, or is it?
Well, I think the big change has been that I have, there's 6 books in print now that my guides have dictated to me, and I've become more of a known quantity in the field. So I've been, somehow authenticated by, a fair amount of media attention from more conventional sources. So people that used to think that it was just insane or I just must be crazy are now given pause by the fact that the work's being looked at seriously by, writers and, and academics. So, I don't have the same response that I used to, but I'm also much more comfortable with it. Up until 3 years ago, I was straddling a life as an academic and as a psychic and channeler. And since I fully stepped into my work, it just means I let go of my academic appointments. I sort of encounter a little bit less resistance than I used to.
Yeah, beautiful. Did it feel like you were having a double life then, or at that stage when it first started to happen, or?
No, because I opened up psychically and began studying a form of energy healing early in my academic career.
Okay.
So the two things were concurrent. I was just doing my work very quietly in my apartment with a small group of people, and that went on for many, many years. I wasn't looking to be known for this. So I was working quietly, but I wouldn't say it was a double life. I just was doing my hobby in my space. The difference is that I became known for the work that I'm doing and began to do it on a much more public stage.
Yeah.
And then I was really just about transitioning. It really never was a double life.
Yeah, beautiful. And do you think, I'm curious, were you born this way, or is it something that evolved, or did it just suddenly happen?
Yeah, I had psychic experiences as a child, but I would never have called myself a psychic, and I still don't like calling myself that because it feels very foreign to me. Although that is the work that I do in my practice and often in front of people in workshops. It developed. I started opening up when I was 25. And it's continued to open and be worked with as I work with it. So I've been taught by the doing of this more than anything else, and my abilities continue to grow as I'm in practice with it.
Yeah, okay. And when it first started to happen, you said you started opening up at 25, and I'm curious because I'm relating to actually things in my own personal life that have been, as I've meditated more and looked at just opening myself up and surrendering to whatever's possible and what can ever come your way. It can kind of be scary at the same time. And and I'm finding it takes courage to step into that self, because we have the egoic self that kind of tells us who we think we are.
Yeah,
And then another part starts revealing itself.
exactly.
What's that like for you? Was when it started to happen, was it scary at first? Did you just embrace it?
Well, I didn't have choice. I didn't seek this out, really. That's not what happened. That wasn't my story. I was a year out of graduate school at Yale. I'd been a playwright. I was having my work produced in New York and London. I was getting published. I was getting a lot of attention very young. And I was, I was a big partying, kid. And I found myself having gotten all of the things that I thought I was supposed to want that would make me okay, and I wasn't okay. And I actually moved towards a spiritual life really out of sheer necessity, not because I thought it would be nice to have. I was raised sort of an atheist. I didn't believe this stuff. But I was working on an opera in Minnesota, and I probably couldn't find drugs in Minnesota or whatever it was. And I found myself more out of sheer necessity than anything else, reaching for this book that the Gideons leave in the hotel drawers in the US. It just said prayer for people in crisis. And I couldn't have named the crisis. I really didn't know what was wrong. I just knew whatever was wrong wasn't getting better. And I said the prayer, and I meant it. And 3 days later, I heard a voice telling me to get my act together, which was the first voice of now, a voice that's pretty constant with me, whether it's the same source or not. But it was the same experience of asking myself a question and getting an unexpected and foreign answer that I never would have chosen for myself. So that was the beginning of it. And then I began to, when I quit drinking and partying and stuff, I opened up, and I was highly sensitive. And I didn't know that. I think I had been, sort of distressing myself and my central nervous system and my own sensitivity intentionally for as long as I could. So my psychic stuff came in increments, and the spiritual life that began to ensue really came at the cost of all of who I thought I was supposed to be. And it was very challenging. It didn't, if anybody told me when I was 25 years old that I would be, traveling around the world with my, closing my eyes and dictating entire books that need no editing, I would think that they were completely mad. But it's what's happened. So yeah, my attachment to ego continues to get confronted. The first book I ever dictated, or the guides ever dictated through me, came right after I'd been let go of from a writing job, and my ego was quashed, and I was like, that's it for me. And a friend of mine called me and said, maybe this would be a good time to write your book about how you became clairaudient. And I was like, screw that. I was saying no. And my guides piped in and said, we have a book to write, and if you'll take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And that was the opening that changed my life. I actually said yes, in spite of all the other evidence. And my personality ego self wanted the other life. I wanted to be who I thought I was supposed to be. And instead, I was gifted with something very different.
Wow. And was it like a greater feeling to trust that? Because how do you even know?
I started hearing for other people. My clairaudience, which is now comes through in channeling, was in service to other people. So I started having these experiences in my late 20s of energy and seeing the lights around people. I'd had this sort of odd experience in 87 on the roof of the building I lived in. I went up there one night and I asked to be woken up, and I had what people later said sounded a bit like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. It was an experience of energy. I don't know what it was. I could have just been hyperventilating, but I started seeing lights around people. And then I had to deal with that and the fact that I was now believing that maybe there was this thing like God, or something you might want to call God. I didn't know. And I was feeling energy, or had felt energy. But I studied a form of energy healing to get a context, and I was volunteering at this place. They called me out of the blue to volunteer. Somebody must have recommended me. I didn't know what I was doing in those days. But there was a center that had opened up in Lower Manhattan to provide services for people with life-challenging illness. It was the height of the AIDS epidemic, and New York was being devastated by it, including many of my friends. So I went there to volunteer, and I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I started hearing things for them. And they would prove out they would prove out the information. So if I had my hand on your chest and I heard the name Billy, and I don't know a Billy, I'd say, who's Billy? And you'd say, my brother, my lover, my father, my dog, the man who beat me up, and then they would release all this energy. And so as the information kept being proven out, I began to trust it more. And really, to this day, the work that I do in terms of hearing is for others, not for myself. It's not like I have a pipeline to my lucky numbers or, the lottery
Yeah.
tickets or, what's going to happen tomorrow. For me, I'll get the information that I need in the moment, and I get instruction in the moment for how to attend to certain things. But that's what helped me to trust it. And it was always with other people there and around. It wasn't like I was wandering around talking to myself. I still do what I do before an audience. Somebody's had to be either on the phone. For the first books, they were dictated to somebody verbally. The last two books were done entirely in front of audiences, 20 to 100 people, in the
Wow.
room. Yeah, and so a video record of all of this happening. I mean, I can't be just, if it's just me and I'm listening and channeling and I don't like what I'm hearing, I'm going to shut off this. I'm going to turn the station. I'm going to turn the dial to something I want to hear, which is going to be something that my personality probably would want to hear or agree with. And that's very different than what the guides that come through me teach. So it's interactive and presence is required.
That's incredible. So that's how the books are written. You literally record your voice and the channels are sending it through like a radio station.
Exactly. And then it's transcribed. They've all been that way. There's no writing involved. I didn't write a word. I wrote the introduction to 2 of the 6 books that are in print. 3. I think there were three introductions total that I wrote, and often very, very brief, just explaining how I work. But the texts themselves are all the transcripts and the unedited transcripts of the dictation. The newest book that just, there's one coming out in August, because I just did the copy edit. The only things that were changed were on occasion some tense agreements and some words that hadn't been pluralized, or occasionally an article, an a to an and or something like that. And that's often the result of my speaking very, very, very quickly. And the
Yeah.
transcriptionist either, bumping or my skipping over a word as I'm speaking that can usually be heard on close listening to the tape.
Got you. Got you. And with all the 6 books and the 7th book that's coming out, are they kind of teachings that follow on from each one?
They do. The foundational book was dictated in 2009. It was called I Am the Word. And in some ways, I suspect, although I haven't revisited that book in years, that the book holds the DNA for all of the teachings. They're all, the genesis of them all and where they're going to take us is probably in there. But the teachings are building, and they're all about claiming the realization of the divine in form. The divine is who and what you are, with the big underlining of what, which is in manifestation, which actually they say allows you to begin to reclaim the world that you're operating in a higher vibrational tone or octave, to lift the world through nature of your being and presence. But the guides have said from the beginning that they teach in a one-room schoolhouse, and they'll teach anybody whenever they show up, with whatever they have to offer. So there are people that I'm sure are beginning their encounter with these teachings in the Book of Freedom, which just came out. And most of those people, if the teachings speak to them, will then find themselves going back and reading the ones that came before.
Yeah, beautiful. I've literally just got sent the Book of Freedom, which I'm going to certainly start to pull apart. So what is the Book of Freedom?
What is the Book of Freedom? Well, I mean, other than it being a channel text and a part of a larger teaching, I believe that it's the book that really begins to address the innate freedom that's held by the aspect of everyone that the guides would call the true self or the divine self. So the true self, that aspect of you that always is and always will be, that aspect of the divine as you, who knows who he is beyond personality, beyond, gender, economic status, or all the crap that we give all this authority to. That's the aspect of you who truly knows who he is and knows what freedom is, because that aspect of you isn't bound by the collective agreements of what's possible. And what the guides are doing in the Book of Freedom is they're lifting us, literally lifting us beyond the collective agreements that we've known of as an established reality, which they say is basically an inherited structure. They say that the personality self in a lot of ways is a structure, and it's a composite of a lot of stuff, you know, where you're born and what decade you're born into and what religion your family practiced or didn't practice, and, you know, all of the things that sort of make up what we say we are. I can say, I'm Paul, I'm 50 something, I live in New York, I went to this school. All that stuff isn't who we are. So they're moving us past the constructs of limitation of what freedom even means. You know, if freedom means I can pay my rent or my mortgage and I'm free to go where I want, you know, without fear, that's, you know, something, but that's really not what this is about at all. We're so limited in what we believe ourselves to be and what we believe our own potential is. And that's what they're moving us beyond, to a reclamation of our true potential.
Yeah, got it. How do we, and again, it comes back to, I guess, fear and love. And we are so accustomed, unconsciously, I believe, of making fear-based decisions quite often just to feel safe and secure in our life. And the things that you talk about, and these are the things that absolutely fascinate me, and I try to my best each day to start living my truth, if you like, and move one day closer to whatever that looks like. As I touch myself more, tap into myself more, I guess. But how do we get beyond the fears that start to hold us back to allow us, you know, what could be ultimate freedom of getting past all these things that we've kind of inherited from the day we're born?
Well, the guides I teach, you know, they teach through me, say something. There are a few things that they always say and that I think are sort of core to their teaching. And one of the things is, you know, that the action of fear is to claim more fear. And every choice we make in fear gets us more of the same. So the simple realization of this, that what I claim in fear gets me more of the same, is also an opportunity to not make choices that are fear-based, and also not listen to fear when we're being instructed in fear. You know, I live in Manhattan, and I was here for 9/11, and I was living downtown. And in the weeks and months that followed in the States, at least in New York, there were these, you know, every day was coded for the amount of danger it presented. Today is a code red or code orange about safety. And it was all about being on high guard. And, you know, I'm a New Yorker from birth. And a lot of people here, and what I noticed here was we got sick of it. We got sick of being told it was a red day or an orange day. And everybody stopped abiding by those alerts and started to live their lives again. And then the alerts went away. We stopped allowing our reality to be prescribed by somebody else, you know, in fear. You know, I mean, it's endemic. And if you watch the news and if you look at the politics of the times we're in, which are all about separation, that's all fear-based, every bit of it. You know, to be fearful, to be taught to be fearful of other people is to deny the divinity that must be inherent in them. And the basis of this whole teaching really is, you know, the divine in all things, and everyone and everything that you see. Because either there is something you can call God or there is not. You know, and the guides say you can't be the light and hold another in darkness. It's just not possible. It's actually the height of hypocrisy. And it's the problem with most organized religion, is they're telling people who's good and who's not. And that's, again, all prescribed through either historical data or political preference. You know, it makes no sense. So don't listen to fear. There's the simple answer. Okay?
And ultimately, we have a choice, moment by moment.
We really do, you know. But we're actually instructed in fear, so we're taught to believe that fear is our ally. That's not to say that you know, I believe in being prudent. I mean, I can learn by picking up a hot frying pan without a pot holder and burning my hand, or I can learn in other ways. I don't have to become frightened of picking up a frying pan You understand?
Yes.
So, I mean, there's wisdom that comes through these things, but I think that there's a very big difference between, I don't know, running from a bear that stumbles onto your campsite, you know, and is hungry, that's to get out, than being frightened of bears. You know, we would all say, well, the bear has a right to be. I just don't want to get eaten by it today. So best to move. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I am. Yeah, no, it's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I'm curious as well to talk a little bit about energy, because we speak about energy. You mentioned about energy moving, and I know you yourself have mentioned it. You guys have mentioned about energy and attunement to ourselves. I mean, would you mind sharing a little bit of that? Because I believe, and I heard the phrase as well, to change your circumstances, you need to change your energy as well. And I'd like to touch on that.
I'll try to. I mean, not that I consider myself an expert. So you hear people talk about manifesting. I'm going to go manifest this, you know, the law of attraction, whatever people call it. The idea really is that we're always manifesting. Everything in my world, in my individual world and the collective world, I'm in energetic accord to. I'm in vibrational or tonal accord to. I'm operating in a shared construct of what a reality is, and my field is confirming this. Now, the guides say that the books that they write are energetic transmissions that work directly with the reader. And they say the words on the page are there to provide a context for the real book, which is the sort of the dialogue in vibration that's happening with the energetic field and consciousness of the reader. And they've said this from the very beginning. In the very first book when it was published, and nobody knew who I was, you know, because I hadn't been public at all or knew the book. But people began to find it. There was no publicity, and people started reviewing the books on Amazon and saying, I'm reading this book and my body's vibrating. I'm reading the book and I'm seeing energy fields. So there's always been phenomena around this. The guides teach through what they call energetic attunements. So they say, you know, we're all radios and we're always in broadcast. And the broadcast we're playing is the consciousness we hold, but that there are other stations that we may be playing that we haven't been attuned to yet. So through these energetic attunements and language, and they say the language is encoded with vibration, you can begin to have the experience of what they call the higher frequency, the higher octave, whatever you want to call it. So all of the books have attunements in them. And the one that they work with most frequently is it's a simple one. And they say this is claimed by the true self, not the personality self, the divine or the God within, whatever you want to call it. That's the aspect of self that is making this claim. And the claim is, I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth. I am free, I am free, I am free. And what that, they say, is doing is literally tuning the radio that you are to play the higher broadcast. Now, each one of those claims, and they're all, the guides say, they're claims of truth, and what is true is always true. So if you say, well, I don't know who I am or how I serve, the true self as you, in fact, does, whether or not it's an expression or not. So you're tuning to that aspect of you who knows who he is in a higher way, what he is in form. And the guides would say how you serve, how anybody serves, is how they're most fully expressed as the true self. And so that attunement in and of itself, when people work with it, it's very often felt. Then all you really have to do is speak the words. It's not about parroting the words. It's also about, I believe, understanding the intent behind them and realizing them. And to realize, the guys say, to realize is to know them is true.
So we're almost teaching ourselves to listen more than, would that be fair to say, as you speak that? Because listen to what the feelings are saying then. and the intent.
No, not the
No?
emotional, because the emotional self in some ways is also born out of a lot of inherited experiences. So I got dumped when I was 21, and I've been worried ever since that I'm going to be dumped
Okay.
again, and I have an emotional response to rejection based on whatever happened to me. That's not what this is about at all. It's rather, it's almost kinesthetic. It's really a palpable experience of vibration that most people feel when they work with this. So when I do these workshops, and even in the live streams that I do, because the guides will attune, you can do this. You don't need to be in the room to do it. You can do it with the book, or you can do it with me and the guides, in another forum. But you can feel the energy moving through your body and often lifting around you as you work with this. And the point of that is you get to have your own experience of this for yourself, at the exclusion of me, because it's not about me, it's about you and that aspect of you that can be aligned and awakened at that level. So I just say, there can be great emotion attached to this for people, because some people have never felt anything like this before. So it's not uncommon in a workshop to have people, who, how can I say this, who are having huge experiences of vibration that have never felt anything. And you can't deny it. I mean, it's kind of like you can't try to experience it either. Sometimes I explain it like, if you're standing under a shower head, you can feel the water. You're not trying to feel the water. It's there.
Yes.
You understand it through your experience of it. And to experience higher energy is really quite comparable to that. It just is. And to try to figure it out is usually to step outside of the current of it, because that takes you out of the experience and back into the intellect.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, when that's been happening to me, Paul, quite regular. Hence why I'm very passionate about getting this work out and the messages and stuff. And I must admit, I was very fearful of it at first, like when they started happening about 4 years ago, because it was like, what the hell's going on? It made me challenge every belief I had of who I thought I was and who I am.
You're right on it. Yeah.
And that was quite incredible. But at the same time, there was a feeling underneath of like, oh my God, there is so much more. I've just got to literally let it in and start exploring this. And then there's been a dance of fear of it, letting it unfold. Fear of it, letting it unfold.
I don't know that stops, because I think it's an ongoing process. But for me, in my late 20s, feeling energy, because you can't fake it. It's there. You can feel it. You can even show it. I used to feel stuff releasing from my body, these currents of energy coming out of the body. I'd say to somebody, feel this. I'd put their hand over the current. They'd jump. Oh my God, what's that? But once you have the feeling of the energy, once you've known it, it does change everything. It means that the world isn't made up quite in the way that we're taught, and everything is challenged. And that's tremendously exciting and can be scary. Every time I've taken another step forward in this work, I've had to confront my own fear. Okay. And I wish that weren't the case, but some of that's me. And maybe it's less about the work than every step I have taken to becoming more visible as one doing this work claims me having to sort of move through another level of my own resistance. But what you're speaking to is such a gift to have that, because once you have that, everything changes. And when that changes for you, you're actually giving permission to everybody else to have their own experience of this. I mean, it's really something. Yeah.
It's, do you still have fears today?
Yeah. Sure. But I want to say I'm not acting on them, but that's probably not true. I think I have less than I do. But I also think that I believe at some level still that fear is a protector of me, and that I'm safer to be in fear. And some of this is just who I was, and how I was brought up. I was brought up in a family that was very fear-based. Every other thing was potentially a disaster. And, I was a chubby, gay, bullied kid. So, you develop this this strategy of survival when you feel that your sense of well-being is in jeopardy. And so to move beyond that, has been huge for me. But the vestiges of that are still present, and I have to be mindful, because I can go into an agreement with what I've known as a de facto reality at the cost of what's available to me in a higher way. So I do get to make that choice. The choice is not to agree to fear. The guides say that the true self isn't in alignment to fear, doesn't know fear. The true self is never afraid. The divine is, because there's nothing to be afraid of.
Is it possible to live without fear?
I don't know. Yes, they're saying yes, and more and more. But I'm hearing you have to believe that it's possible first. See, it's not about like medicating the self to be unafraid or unemotional. I don't think it's that at all. Some of it, I suspect, is about realizing the transient nature of reality. And I would suggest maybe that everything is an opportunity to learn, even the stuff that we would say we wouldn't choose for ourselves.
Okay.
That's, then it's school. Then this is school. It's all school. It's all an opportunity to learn. But we're taught to be invested in outcome. Who am I without my job or my body being the way I think it's supposed to be, or the relationship that I count on? And we become attached to these things. And in some ways, we often, I suspect, turn them into gods,
Yeah.
So, we get to find out who we are in some ways when the things that we've counted on the most aren't there. If my job is if my career is my God, I may learn the lessons of releasing those attachments through the release of the job. I mean, I don't know. I think everybody has different lessons to learn. So I'm not going to say that there's one size that fits all.
Totally. I would love to know your opinion, or the guide's opinion, whatever. What would be what's our purpose in life? Because I think we can quite often get confused if there is a purpose.
I don't know. My assistant, the guy who travels with me and sets up my events, I'm very fond of him. And he's like, I think we're just here to have a good time. And I just want to go to the beach. And I bless him for that. It's great. And he knows that there's much more. He's actually a very wise young man. But I get a kick out of that, because my experience has not been that. I believe that we're really here to learn, and that the soul comes in with lessons that it needs to receive and work with, and that this is all opportunity. I believe that we're also here for realization, and realization, as my guides teach it, is the realization of the innate divine, if you want to call it that exists in all things. And that's finally the purpose of being, is the realization of the inherent divine that must be in everything, or can be in nothing. But, for all I know, we're here to learn what we came to. I'm going to ask and see if they want to say something different.
Okay.
And I wasn't planning on channeling during this exchange,
yeah.
but I always have to say I whisper the words and repeat them. So we'll see if I can even hear anything you're going to know for. The guys are saying you're here to know who you are. You don't expect to be beyond what you expect to be, or been taught to be, or have been taught to be. You're here to realize who and what you are. You're here to realize who and what you are. The divine as who and what. The divine as who and what that has come to be realized, that has come to be realized in fruition as you, how you choose to operate, how you choose to operate as a man or woman, as a man or a woman in your daily life. In your daily life is always informed by history, is always informed by history. You were taught to be who you were taught to be, and what was expected of you, and what was expected of you. To realize the true self, to realize the true self is to betray that aspect of you, who was taught to believe he should be this, that, who was taught to believe he should be this or that, and then it's undergoing. And that is the transition you are undergoing, and he is as well. And he is as well in a different way. Each of you decides in your own way, the degree of realization. The degree of realization you may claim in a lifetime. You may claim in a lifetime. You inherit the learning. You inherit the learning that is present for you, in the higher realm, and as you attend to the teachings you receive, and as you attend the teachings you receive through the life you live, through the life you live, you progress and develop in the next lifetime. And perhaps in the next lifetime, you'll choose very different lessons to reincarnate with, period. And they're saying period.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So, and I'm thinking about listeners and different people at all different walks of life listening to this. So, would it be fair to say then, if we start looking at our circumstances, because sometimes we might be in pain, we might be in suffering, we might be in a place that we're genuinely not happy, but could we start to look at that and start asking ourselves, what's the lesson in this then?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, but I wouldn't want to move into a kind of self-indulgent narcissism with that, I mean, this idea of why did I create this, miserable event? In some ways, I don't know. I mean, sometimes, I live in a town where there's bad water and everybody gets cancer. Why did I move to the town? The house was affordable. And why did I drink the water? Nobody told me it was polluted. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons. Now, in vibration, I would suggest we're all in energetic accord to what we experience. So while I didn't create the war in Iraq, I'm participatory to it because the consciousness that I hold is witnessing it and in perception to it, and what I bring to it by consciousness informs the thing I see. You understand this? So to call something terrible is to make it terrible. To call something beautiful is to decide beauty. And we're always doing this individually and collectively. So, I mean, if the real question is, what are we learning through suffering or pain? I mean, I can ask many things. They're saying many things, and some of it is self-induced, and some of it is self-induced. You think you should be in pain. You think you should be in pain, or know yourself through something, or know yourself through suffering. And perhaps you don't need that. And perhaps the lesson would be that you don't need that when the body is suffering. When the body is suffering, there are lessons for the body. There are lessons for the body. When a culture is suffering, when a culture is suffering, there are lessons for the culture. There are lessons for the culture. When a world is collapsing, when a world is collapsing, as you see before you, there are lessons for the world. There are lessons for the world. How you integrate the teachings of the times and how you integrate the teachings of the times you stand, because will be a testament to your survival, not only as an individual, but as a species. But as a species, you always have choice. You always have choice. You are told what to believe. You are told what to believe, who to believe, what outcome should be, and what outcome should be. What you're about to see on your plane, but what you are about to see on your plane is a reminder of the lack of control, the individual holds. The individual holds, and also the responsibility, and also the responsibility the individual has to the collective, to one. Until you realize you are one, you will war, you will create suffering, you will create suffering, you will damn your brother, you will damn your brother, and in doing so damn yourself, and in doing so damn yourself. This is choice. This is choice. It is not a requirement for being. It is not a requirement for being, period. And they're saying period.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. So I'm just trying to, like, there's so much information coming through. So it's almost like, then if we want to have a greater contribution, it literally comes to be, we need to be the change that we want to see in the world.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, the guides have this claim that they make, and it's the claim, I know how I serve. And I always used to think, and then they would say, how you serve is how you're most fully expressed as the true self. And I was like, okay, well, that means like what we do for a living or how we spend our day. I was assuming that it was something practical at that level. And I understand that while it can be that, it need not be that. And the vibration you hold, or the consciousness you hold, the tone that your field is emitting, is actually in interaction with everything that you encounter. And as you begin operating in the higher vibration, you're actually in a position to be lifting everything to the higher vibration through co-resonance. I just learned the word entrainment a couple of months ago. Somebody in the workshop said, oh, that's entrainment. I didn't know what it meant, but yes, it's the same thing. the musical tone that you're playing in resonance is lifting what it encounters to the tone. And the guides say, finally, that's how you serve. And if you're called into action at that level, you will be called. But it's not about finding the next right thing to do, which is usually done at the level of personality.
Yeah. Okay.
You understand the difference?
Yes. 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 Amazing. And do you recall the training, or do you have to go back and literally re-listen to your audio or the books? Or
Yeah, I'm getting to be a better teacher of the material in the books for one who doesn't read them.
right. Okay.
And the books come through me, and the process of channeling them is somewhat exhausting. And I get so sick of hearing the sound of my voice after a day of channeling. I can't tell you. And the last thing that I want to do is go back and revisit. So I often don't look at the work until I read the transcripts now. And then I go, and the whole time the book is coming together, because I don't see the whole book until it's done. I don't even know if the whole thing's going to make sense or feel like a book once it's finished, because the guys just say, this is the end of the book. And that's how I know they're done.
Yeah.
It's not like it's planned or there's a day count. So I don't go back and listen, but I'm in the presence of the teachings, and I'm probably in an even better way in the presence of students of the teachings often, who are asking questions of the guides, and they will answer, and occasionally I'll say, Paul, you answer, which is, I'll do my best, and then they'll correct me if I'm saying it wrong, So I always say I'm not the best student of this work, but I am a student of this work, and there are people whose lives are transforming in leaps and bounds through this stuff, and I'm incredulous that that's happening, because there's a part of me that's still going, is this really happening? It's just so strange.
Yeah, incredible. Well, I'm glad you're sharing it with the world, Paul. I really am. And where do you see yourself? Even you'd stepped down 3 years ago. Even 3 years from now, are you just going to keep going with the flow, and just see what happens? Or
when somebody says to me, where do you want to be in 5 years? I just think that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, because it's the antithesis in some ways of the teaching. I want a relationship. I want to move out of New York and have a nice place to go to, because I'm traveling so much. I just want like a place with a hot tub where I can just sit, and not worry about the day. My needs are sort of ordinary, I think, or what I want. Maybe those are my wants and not my needs. So I see myself, and hopefully continuing to work. I'm fascinated by the work, and I'm beginning now finally to enjoy the life that I have through the work, although it took me about 2.5 years to let go of the identity I'd had as a college teacher, which I was very attached to, and it was a secure identity, and to let go of 2 full-time academic appointments and insurance benefits and, everything that I thought I should have going into the latter years of my life was challenging. And now I'm happy about it, But I don't know where this is going to take me, nor can I. So far, every time I show up to work, the guides show up to work too. And I'm grateful for that, because if they didn't, I'd be out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Will it be taking you to Australia at any time in the future?
I would love to go to Australia. All I need are enough people to show up for a workshop to make it viable. But I would love to go. It's actually been on my wish list of a place to get to through this work for a while now.
Have you been here before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, you should make that happen. It's a beautiful country. It really is.
I see.
It really is. All right, Paul, I'm going to change the gears and ask some questions that I ask everyone on the show. And the first question is, what's been a low point in your life, but has later been a blessing? We might have even covered it.
Well, the one that I mentioned, getting fired and then finding out, and actually being fired because I'd had the worst writer's block of anybody I'd ever met for years. And then finding that on the other side of that was the ability to channel books in a matter of days and weeks without any editing. That was a huge gift and stunning to me. But truthfully, all of it, every big change in my life has come through a rerouting of my expectations, and sometimes, you know, falling through the trapdoor in the floor or up through the trapdoor in the ceiling into another way of being that I wouldn't have chosen, except it happened anyway.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. What does your morning routine look like? Do you meditate, or do you?
No, I'm terrible. I mean, you know, the assistant I mentioned earlier sort of baited me into meditating every morning. I did it for a while and I felt great when I did it. No, I drag my ass out of bed. I feed the puppy because the puppy, you know, jumps all over my face to get fed, and it's the only reason I'm getting out of bed. And then, you know, I mean, that's it. And I drink 3 iced coffees really fast before I have to get on the phone and do readings or go to the airport and go someplace in Channel. It's not a very enlightened experience of a morning, I must say.
I love it.
Trees out the window and being grateful. But I am grateful, and I do that before I go to sleep. I remind myself.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. I love it. If you could have dinner with anyone tonight from any time frame, anywhere in the world, to have a conversation, you know, of interest, who would it be, do you think, and why?
Right now, I would actually want to have dinner with the guide that I'm working with the most closely, because my 2 or 3 visual encounters with him have been very remarkable. And mostly it's auditory, you know, it's consciousness and telepathic. But I have so many questions, and they're the kinds of questions I'd rather have, you know, over lunch than, you know, sitting there with my eyes closed and a recording device in a room full of people watching.
Yeah, 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 beautiful, beautiful. Do you know much about them, like on a personal level, or it's...
You know, I channeled last night and they spoke to this, and they spoke to any ideas that we may have of them would still be informed by the relics of history that we're dragging into this whole conversation. So I know some, and I probably could know much more if I would open up to a whole conversation about them that I've been resistant to. I mean, I call them the guides because when my ex found out I could do this, he used to say, ask the guides this, ask the guides that. But the name they come through with is the name Melchizedek, which is a priesthood, and it's an order, and they're teachers. So, and they've been around a long, long time. So that much I understand, but not much more, you know, perhaps one day.
Yeah, fair enough. And last thing, is there anything you'd like to leave with our listeners from everything that we've covered today, just to ponder on?
I want to say listen to themselves in a higher way than they're used to, because that's how they'll begin to attune to a higher broadcast. Don't operate just through history, through what you've been taught to believe, but listen to what may exist beyond you. I think your listeners will be surprised.
Yeah, beautiful. And for anyone wants to get a copy of your book, especially the latest book, The Book of Freedom, Amazon, I'm guessing, Audible.
Yep. They're on all the booksellers, and you can get them online through all the major distributors.
Beautiful. And your website is just literally paulselig.com.
That's correct.
I'll link to the show notes after this as well, and be sure to make it as easy as possible. Paul, thank you so much for coming on today. That was phenomenal, and just speaking from the heart and sharing the wisdom that you learned for all of us over the years. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the talk. Thank you.
Thank you.